Good morning, everyone. Welcome to NYMER's webinar on distracted driving, chainsaw, and chipper safety. My name is Dave Bloodgood. I'm Risk Management Coordinator for NYMER's Risk Management Department. I want to just get a couple of notes out of the way first. Those of you who registered on Zoom for this webinar are in fact going to be getting a certificate. And then the others that are watching a common screen with you, have everybody sign a sign-in sheet. That sign-in sheet provides the documentation that you need to show that everybody was in the training today. We can only send certificates to those who registered on Zoom. We're tracking the time that everybody was on there and such, and that's what we can vouch for. So, but one is as good as the other. Okay, so just when that certificate comes through, you might want to staple the sign-in sheet to it, and then you're all good to go. Okay, so we're going to start off with distracted driving, and I'm going to just take a moment here to share my screen. So give me a sec. Okay, you should all be able to see that now. So we'll get going. There are a number of slides that pertain, we use this presentation for multiple audiences. And so you guys don't fit the profile of your typical teen driver. So we're going to kind of skip through certain slides on our way. And that way we can move right on into the chainsaw and chipper. So what is distracted driving? There are three main types of distraction: visual, manual, and cognitive. So visual, obviously, you're taking your eyes off the road. Manual, your hands are off the wheel. So you have to look at your phone to see what's coming in or what you intend to type out. Manual, you got one hand on there, at least, pressing the buttons to get your message out. If that were the case, cognitive, you're kind of thinking about what it is you're either reading or trying to communicate to somebody else. So distracted driving is any non-related driving activity a person engages in that has the potential to distract you from the primary task of driving, and that makes the risk of crashing or some unintended and unwanted outcome occurring. So the thing about texting is that it involves all three of those distractions. Okay, you can see something going on a yard somewhere and notice it, and you've got a visual distraction going on, but your hands are still on the wheel, and you might just take a moment to notice that. A manual distraction, you might reach for something over on your seat. Again, is not as distracting as having, everything going on at once when you're texting. But there's a lot of different kinds of distraction that we face. Using a cell phone is just one of them, but I think that we all occasionally are in enough of a hurry and hungry or thirsty or whatever, and so eating and drinking or even talking to a passenger in your vehicle, kind of gets your mind off just focusing on the road and traffic patterns and what's going on. I think we've all seen somebody coming up behind us with, they're putting their makeup on, grooming, whatever. Nobody likes to see that because you kind of imagine your rear end getting crunched in, and I tend to avoid having somebody behind me like that for long. I either let them pass, I pull into a different lane. If we're in a place we don't know well, we might be looking at our GPS. God forbid we were watching a video or something, but hey, there's those out there that if it can be done, somebody's doing it. And more than anything, you guys are professional drivers. We realize that. And we know that, in fact, you are not subject yourself to a lot of these bad behaviors because you understand the consequences. You've been around the block enough. You see what some of those bad outcomes are. But we're sharing the road with those who are distracted. So it becomes even more important that each of us has really got our head in the game and is making sure that, in fact, we are just focused down on the task at hand. 94% of all traffic accidents involve human error. Every 10 seconds behind the wheel, a person makes a whole lot of decisions about either speeding up, slowing down, adjusting to the contours of the road in one way or the other, anticipating what we see ahead, whether it's an intersection that somebody may be approaching a traffic light too fast, and you're afraid that even though you have the green light, are they going to stop in time? Is that pedestrian who's looking at their phone going to know not to step out in front of you? If you see something like that, it's of course incumbent on you to adjust to it. And so again, it's just so important that we have our head in the game at all times. There's just a lot on the line these days. Roads are busier than they've ever been. People are more distracted, it seems, than they've ever been. There's a lot of room for something to go sideways on us. Every 7 seconds across the country, somebody's injured in a car crash. Every 15 minutes, unfortunately, somebody's killed. And that somebody, of course, has friends, family, people that depend on them and that are going to be having their life changed in a tragic way as a result. Lots of crashes occur during the workday or on your way to work when the roads are more congested. People can be in a hurry, they're running late. A lot of things can go wrong. Employers absorb the costs associated with these crashes, whether they occur on the job or not. If somebody has an accident on the way to work, they're not at work. They can't share the load. They might, in your case, if you had an accident on the way to work, somebody wails into your car, then you're not going to be there to cover your plow route or to handle the other jobs that you've got going on. Motor vehicle crashes are the #1 cause of workplace death. Sorry about that. I just happened to go back. Okay. To what degree do you think distractions are, on your mobile device impair your ability to drive? Well, surprisingly, there are a number of people that feel that it impacts them very little or not at all. Now, we know that that is not the case. We know that it is something that is certainly a serious impediment to driving. But it's remarkable that so many of the people that you share the road with don't feel that way. According to the National Safety Commission, undercounted is underinvested. How incomplete crash reports impact efforts to save lives. No state crash reports have fields or codes for police to record the level of driver fatigue, for instance. We all know that, tired drivers are going to get into accidents at a far higher rate than an alert driver. With 26, so half the states across the nation lack a field to capture texting. 32 states lack fields to record hands-free cell phone use. So that last bullet point, we know that hands-free is safer in some respects than holding it in your hand. It at least allows both your hands to be on the wheel, but you're still going to be mentally distracted by the message that you're trying to send. An estimated 38,000 people died in car crashes in 2019. That marks a 21% increase over 2014. Statistical analysis of available data estimates that between 80 and 90% of all accidents have some form of distraction as a cause. About 10% of fatalities, of all fatalities on the road, are directly attributable to distracted driving. 80% or more will have some form of distraction as a secondary causation. So, what that means is they may have written down that you ran a red light, or that somebody ran a red light causing the accident. But likely they ran that red light because they were distracted. They were doing something other than having their eyes and head, mind on the road and on driving, on the task of driving. The average person sending or reading a text takes their eyes off the road for a little over 5 seconds. So, at 55 miles an hour, you're covering basically a football field. Now, sometimes it could be helpful to think about, rather than in miles per hour, you think about how many feet you're traveling per second. 1 mile per hour, you're traveling 1.5 feet for every second at 1 mile per hour. So basically at 40 miles an hour, you're traveling about 59 feet per second. Okay, so think about a horseshoe pit. A horseshoe pit's 40 feet. So in 1 second, you're traveling, 1.5 horseshoe pits, let's say. At 60 miles an hour, you're traveling very, very close to a football field's distance. Now, a lot of you, if you're plowing, you're not traveling that fast. But even at 30 miles per hour, you're traveling over the course of 5 seconds, 2/3 of a football field at 30 miles per hour, roughly 200 feet. Now, when you think about if you're driving along and you're distracted and something happens and all of a sudden you react to it, you want to hit the brakes, bring your truck to under control and to a stop or whatever. But first you have to notice it and perceive what's going on. And that perception or reaction time takes a little bit. So, there's about 1 to 1.5 seconds that it takes to perceive and react to a situation. And then depending on the vehicle you're driving, how fast is it going to slow down? Naturally, if you're driving a smaller car, your braking distance is certainly going to be less than that of a fully weighted truck. Once you've got all that sand or salt in the back of your truck, you're overweight anyway. That truck isn't going to stop in just a few feet. It's going to take a lot further. So when you consider the distance traveled, if you take your eyes off the road, the distance traveled during that time, then add that to your perception of having to react to that incident or an incident you see, and then how quickly your truck is going to be able to slow down and avoid something, you can see that that time adds up and it can really make the difference between a bad outcome and something that we can just sort of remember as something to avoid the next time. So all distractions are dangerous. We've gone over that texting, in fact, is among the most dangerous because it just takes into account all of the different forms: visual, cognitive, and manual. New research findings suggest that voice-to-text applications offer no real safety advantage over manual texting. You're still thinking about stuff and you're still, got your mind on the act of speaking or thinking about what you're saying. It just doesn't take a lot in terms of time for something to go wrong.
Are you okay? Oh,
So that's certainly an incident where there was a lot of ground covered where that driver clearly had no idea that something was about to happen. There was no touch on the brake. I'm sure you'd all agree. And this is a person that has their kids in the car, obviously. Those people are out there sharing the road with us, folks. We really need to be mindful of that. And I know that you are. Of course, today's training is as much a reminder as going over the finer points. This is not a new topic, just like you all sit through sexual harassment and all that every year. I know that most of you sitting in this room today or in your various locations have, in fact, been through distracted driving training before. Okay, so we're not looking to belabor anything, but you got to keep this stuff top of mind because it's out where you live. You're the pros on the road, and you're sharing the road with lots of knuckleheads, okay? So it's tempting to send a quick text or answer an email when you're making a trip across town on roads that you really know well. I mean, how many of us have driven places where, say you're driving home from work, you drive that road every day. How many times have you thought that once you pull in the driveway, geez, I don't remember one detail about that drive back? It's because you're on autopilot. You know the road. You know every curve. You know when to brake. You know when to speed up. But anything can happen. Like a deer can run out. Something unanticipated can happen. So even glancing at your road for a very brief time can make all the difference. Okay, so just a word. You all have families out there, and you know people between the ages of 16 to 25 are really the ones that are so much at risk. You know, our families. My daughter, for instance, when she first got her license, she left my house. She was on her way back to her mom's place, and she got about a mile and a half from my house and called me that she had had an accident. When I got there, I learned that she had started up from a stop sign and T-boned a car that had the right of way, you know, on a crossroad. There was a good quarter mile or more of sight distance on either side. Okay. But so I know that she had her face in her phone. Kids just don't understand. They haven't got the life experience that we do. They don't really have, you know, that sense that it can happen to them. They feel very much in control of everything they're doing. They're very, like this is easy, but we all know what goes on the roads. And sometimes, you know, they have to learn that hard lesson. And fortunately, she did. She's now 30 years old and a good driver and accident free since then.
I think we all do it. I'm busy during the day, so while I'm out running errands, I call friends and family to see how they're doing.
If I'm already stopped at a red light, what does it matter if I respond to my text messages while I'm waiting for the light to turn green?
okay. Go ahead and start texting for me.
Okay.
Now, I want you to keep texting, but count to 10 for me.
1, 2, 3.
You see that short pause you just took? That was you being distracted by your text.
Yeah, I was trying to focus on the message, but I guess that's the point. You're right.
Exactly.
That's not good.
The National Highway Traffic Safety Administration estimates suggest that distracted driving contributes to 10% of fatal crashes, leading to around 4,000 deaths and 400,000 injuries every year. Okay, go ahead and start texting. Now, I want you to stop texting, put the phone down, and let's drive. Okay, stop. What I see is you're not fully engaged in your surroundings. You're still distracted by the text.
Yeah, you're right. I was.
Our latest research found that mental distractions can linger for as long as 27 seconds, meaning even after drivers put down the distraction, they're still not fully engaged in the driving task. Okay, next time you get in the car, I want you to take your phone, put it in the center console or a bag, that way you're not distracted by it.
Yeah, I can do that.
It's just not safe to drive while you're distracted. We can all be an example by putting our phone away while we drive. If an emergency arises while you're driving and you need to use your phone, pull over to a safe location and park your car. Be sure to have put your phone away and be fully aware of your surroundings before you proceed to drive again. Taking your eyes off the road, even for a few seconds, could cause someone injury or even death. Tell your friends and family the importance of not being distracted while driving to make our roads a safer place.
AAA, a force for good for over 100 years.
You can see that there's a lot of information on teens on here. We do give this to different groups, but you can see too from this panel that there really are a higher incidence by far of younger drivers and such having crashes. So distractions, it only takes a moment to cross over that center line into somebody else's path. As you guys can imagine, NYMER insures 930 municipalities. We've seen just about everything. If it can happen out there, it does. A lot of times we go through our day and nothing really happens to those around us or that we know. And it seems that a bad occurrence can be something that's somewhat remote. But we've had instances where people have been killed or end up paralyzed as a result of either another driver hitting our insured or in fact, our insured hitting other drivers. And it's always, it shakes you up when you read the claims notes because you realize just the prevalence of this kind of thing out there on the road.
My Grace. She's my everything. She's the greatest gift that life could give. She's what makes life so beautiful, so fulfilling. To see my little girl smile is all that I lived for. But all that was taken away from me in less than a blink of an eye. I would give everything I have to see that beautiful smile just once more. Brady, watch out! Somebody help me! Guys! Wait! Look what you did! Sorry. Look what you did! Look what you did to my baby! You took her away from me! You took her away from me!
Okay, folks, I know that was rough, but hey, you're big boys. And let's face it, what we watch on TV, how many people, what's the body count on some of those shows you watch? This sort of thing is where it really drives home the point that this is the sort of thing that really happens. Okay. So, while it's an uncomfortable thing to have watched that, just bear it in mind. There's tragic occurrences out there. So, just a few years ago, the number one unsafe driving behavior was speeding. Well, today it's distraction. It's just a fact of life. Driving while having a phone conversation, hands held or hands free, is the equivalent of being legally drunk. Okay, so blowing a 0.08. So studies have shown that the odds of being in a crash while texting are a whole lot higher than they are if you're not distracted in any way. It's the number one cause of employee death, motor vehicle collisions. There are lots of us, you guys are pro drivers, you know that there's lots of others out there, whether they're driving a FedEx truck or they're running parts in for an auto parts place. One thing or another, there's lots and lots of drivers out there outside the times that we're all just commuting to work. So the law's changed. Okay, there's a lot of consequences that follow for not just youths and teens and those with their probationary licenses or their permits or their whatever. You guys, your CDL conveys upon you a higher level of responsibility. That's why you can't blow more than a 0.04. That's why there's random drug tests and all that. Now, distractions are just, another thing that invade our lives and that we need to be mindful of. Okay, so we know that the costs of first offenses are expensive enough, but they certainly go up after that. And you don't want to run the risk of jeopardizing your livelihood. So, Section 1225D, use of portable electronic devices under New York State law, no person shall operate a commercial motor vehicle while using any portable electronic device on a public highway, including while temporarily stationary because of traffic or traffic control device or any other brief delays. And no motor carrier shall allow or require its drivers to use a portable electronic device while operating a commercial motor vehicle. So basically, Your bosses, they understand this. They're not going to, if they call you on your cell phone or they contact you on the radio or whatever, and you're in kind of you're driving, whatever the situation is, they don't know whether you're on a really busy highway or approaching a traffic intersection or whatever's going on. They will understand if you don't pick up right then. Wait until you have a moment to pull over safely and return that call. So you're prohibited from making a phone call, okay? Those with CDLs, you're prohibited from making a phone call or using a portable electronic device while traffic is temporarily stationary or because of a traffic control device. We just went over that. First offense can include a 6-month suspension of your CDL. So no one's immune. This photograph was sent to us courtesy of the Ulster County Sheriff. It's one of his deputies that had this accident. He did not put up with that sort of thing. He would dock vacation time for at-fault accidents. And, you know, law enforcement, that's full of some pretty young deputies and officers that may have had nothing in their driving history aside from a two-wheel drive, front-wheel drive Civic. And then they're plopped into a powerful pursuit vehicle that has a computer and sirens and all manner of things. And so distractions are a real problem in law enforcement among many of the agencies that I work with. And it's something that constantly has to be fought against. But 1 in 6 fire apparatus will be involved in a collision too. Now, there's a lot of adrenaline flowing through these guys as they're responding to, you know, there's a lot on the line at the end of the road for these guys and women. They're going to put out a fire somewhere. They don't know if there's people trapped inside. They don't know how bad the fire is going to be. There's a lot of things going through their minds. So no, they do no one any good, and neither do officers or you guys if something happens and you're not able to fulfill your mission. So 20% or 1 in 5 DPW or highway vehicles will be involved in a collision this year. Again, coming back to who you share the road with, this is not necessarily going to be your fault. It's really just that you have to be so aware of it because, you know, it takes a lot of time to stop the truck if something happens. And we know that those that we share the road with have very little respect for the fact that your plow truck full of sand or salt is not going to react as quickly as the vehicle that they're driving. They'll cut in front of you and hit the brakes or whatever. We know that. So it becomes incumbent on you to really have your head in the game. 1 in 6 municipal vehicles will be in an accident this year. So municipalities have everything from you guys to law enforcement to social services to dial a bus. There's lots and lots of municipal vehicles out there on the road. And auto claims are one of the top causes of claims when you compare them against property, general liability, public officials claims. Auto typically is not uncommon for them to lead the pack. So wear your seatbelts too. I know a lot of trucks are coming out with high-vis seatbelts. And so you can see whether, you know, that driver has his orange seatbelt pulled across him or not. It's really important. You're likely to be permanently disabled at accidents under 35 miles an hour than you are to be killed, okay? Now, sure, you're in a big vehicle. You're likely to have a lot more protection than whatever or whoever you hit. But that could also send you careening off the side of the road in your effort to avoid an accident or whatever. We all know that there's lots of different possible outcomes. 72% of people in motor vehicle accidents under 35 miles an hour not wearing a seatbelt end up with some form of permanent disability. So that affects your quality of life. Those of you with bad backs out there and you bemoan something that you did like I do, I've had a bad back for about 12 years and I can pin it right to the moment it happened. I was doing something that I shouldn't have been doing, lifting something that I could have lifted when I was younger perhaps, but I always felt pretty invincible and never had any limitations, and suddenly I made a mistake. And so, a motor vehicle accident can change even the most careful person outside of work into somebody that has a problem going forward. Defensive driving training has proven to be an effective solution and controls liability costs associated with work-related vehicle crashes, reduces premiums on your personal insurance policies. So you'll save 10% over the course of 3 years on your personal insurance if you take a defensive driving class. Reduces motor vehicle incident rates, decreases workers' comp claims, improves productivity by keeping employees safe on and off the job, and keeps you showing up for work, which helps share the load. Also, your municipality that you represent out there, every time you get behind the wheel, if a municipal vehicle causes an accident or is driving in an unsafe manner amongst the public, that causes the reputation of your municipality to take something of a dive, by those people that see irresponsible driving among any commercial vehicle or municipal vehicle, or even private vehicles with some kind of logo on the side. You have a bad impression of whomever they're representing. You got to be mindful of that. You're out representing the municipality you work for. So when you consider how defensively your posture is behind the wheel, imagine if somebody offered you 100 grand, if you could safely deliver a priceless artifact, and would you drive differently then? Sure you would. And aren't you just as important as that artifact or the drivers and pedestrians you pass on the way there? Sure, of course you are. But we don't often look at ourselves in that way. I mean, I know I don't necessarily look at myself as a priceless artifact, for sure. But I bet your kids do. I bet your kids look at you like, what would they do without you, right? Here's a few reminders for the next time you or your employees get into a municipal or personal vehicle. Just take that phone and put it in airplane mode. Disable any notifications while your phone is in motion. I know that my phone won't provide notifications. It's probably a default setting on many phones. Try to get in your breakfast or whatever, when you're stationary, whether you're at home or you're on a break, or just if you're really hungry and you got to get something, take just a few minutes stationary to eat it, to drink it, whatever. If you need to check out where you're going, or you're not quite sure of the route you're going to take, you're on your way somewhere, remember, that you all know where you drive for work, but this could be something on a weekend. You want to show up for work Monday morning. So if you're going somewhere and you're not quite sure where you are or where you're going, pull over and just take a look at the GPS or your phone or whatever, so it doesn't get in the way of your driving. Avoid reaching down or behind your seat, picking stuff up. Just takes a moment. And it's also like if you reach behind the seat on the passenger side, you got your hand on the wheel, you're reaching to the right, down. It's a little tough to keep that car in a straight line. It might pull a little to the right. You look up quickly and all of a sudden you're on the shoulder. Don't want that to happen. Avoid looking or, just plowing through something when you're driving. And wait until you get where you're going to check your emails or your text messages. Remember that using the phone, certainly texting, it involves all three of those distractions: visual, manual, and cognitive. And it basically disables you the same amount that blowing a .08 is going to do. So just drive now, okay? Jay, if you're on, you want to take over and handle this end of things?
Sure, I'm on. Hey, good morning, everybody. On this section here, I put this in because this is something that happened to my brother more than 10 years ago now, or almost, yeah, more than 10 years ago now. He was walking back to work after taking lunch. He was working in downtown Montgomery, Alabama for the EMS program for the state. And as he was walking across the street with the light, with the walk sign, a young lady in a little red car who was on her phone and not paying attention went through the red light and hit him, threw him about 40 feet from where she stopped. His head went through the windshield a couple of inches, broke his hip, his arm, some ribs. I always said he was hard-headed, and that's probably the only thing that saved him. He's doing pretty well now. I mean, after lots of surgeries and rehab and everything, he does well. He's now the assistant chief of finance for accounting for Florida Department of Agriculture and Consumer Services, and I had to put that in there because only government has titles that are that long. But that said, this girl didn't just change his life. It changed her life. It changed my life. It changed his youngest son there, Eli, in the picture. My brother has an older son who is in Auburn now and is playing baseball. So he's pretty good. My brother taught him a lot. He got him some great coaching. But Eli's growing up now too, and he doesn't have the same dad. My brother can't teach him the way that he was able to teach his older brother. So two completely different lives, and lots of things were changed by that one day that girl was on the phone. So most of us probably know somebody that's been in a car accident, and many of us have probably been in a car accident. Most of those accidents have some form of distraction as a primary or secondary cause, whether it was changing the radio or looking at something else. There's lots of things that can happen. And before I give this back to Dave, I just want to ask you, what one piece of information could you get on a phone call that you would never, ever want to receive in your life? What's the worst information you could ever get? And do you really want to get that when you're behind the wheel? So don't pick up that phone while the vehicle's in motion. Wait, pull over. It only takes 30 seconds to a minute to find a place to pull over. Get that information then when you're stopped, because you probably don't want to get it while you're moving.
Thank you, Jay. So, like I said, we go through our lives, and if it's not happening to us, we may get a little bit complacent, but we know it happens to lots of families, and I'm sure it's happened to some of you out in the audience here too, where a bad piece of, bad fortune occurred to somebody that we know, care about. So these are just a few of the things that we have gone through.
This is an awareness test. How many passes does the team in white make?
Go!
The answer is 13. But did you see the moonwalking bear?
Go!
It's easy to miss something you're not looking for. I'm a cyclist, please look out for me. I wear bright clothes and I have a strobe on the back of my bike, but hey, I'm always looking, and I also have a mirror I check, just in case I have to dive for the ditch. Here's some resources that you can, if you wanted to have your kids or your family take a look at some of the things that are out there. These are some of the resources that are available. There's plenty more beyond this too, okay? If you have any questions, you no doubt have my email on the original invite. Here's Jay's. Jay is also going to be leading us through the chainsaw and chipper portion. So we're going to move along. I'm going to stop sharing my screen. Jay, do you have, you ready to share your own?
I would, but it says it's disabled.
Okay.
So maybe you can fix that.
Yeah, it's disabled. Okay, let me see. Not sure that I can. If not, I'll just run them on my end.
That's fine.
Well, let's see if I can just, hold on. You must be a panelist here, so I'm
It should be,
sharing.
but for
Yep.
some reason, when I click it, it says, wait, here we go.
Yep, you should be able to do it.
Hey, there we are.
Okay, good.
Excellent.
Okay, Jay, take it away.
All right. Well, good morning, everyone, again. I hope that the distracted driving video struck a nerve. You never know the lives that are saved by the trainings that happen, and somebody makes a decision one day not to do something or to do something different, and you never know what didn't happen because of it. And anytime we do any type of training on these things, we also have to think about the other things that are going on. Different tools have different risks, different jobs have different risks. So I want to go through, talk about wood chipper safety, and we'll get to chainsaw safety in a minute. But the wood chipper safety is really important. It's one of these tools that, depending on your location, you may not use it much. You may use it a few times a year. You may be using it all year round. It just depends on the situation you're in. But either way, it can really be dangerous. There's lots of things that have happened over the years because of these things. Sometimes they sit around and don't get the maintenance they should get. And we try and throw them into use at the last minute. And there's huge risks that go on with these things. You know, it takes one mistake to really end someone's life or change it significantly. So we're going to talk a little bit about the basic structure and function and talk about some of the accidents that have happened, because they really don't happen very often. And a lot of times, one of the reasons they do happen is because we don't hear about these things unless it happens near us or to somebody we know. We don't think about how badly something like this can injure some people. So most all wood chippers have some type of a powerful engine, usually diesel or gasoline. They've got rotating, spinning knives and barrel knives, and they've got powered feed mechanisms. They're all different sizes, from the one here on the left, which is a little backyard wood chipper, all the way up to the big, huge barrel chippers that are out there. So it just depends, but they all have similar basic operating procedure or mechanics. Here's a picture of a couple of different types of blades. They're spinning very fast. They can really tear into any material that goes into these wood chippers. Some things get, like metal though, do get kicked back out rather dangerously. They can be gravity fed, they can be power fed, they can be winch line fed. If they're fed by a winch line, make sure that you're using a rope to tie to the end of the tree or limb that's being pulled into it. Don't just use the cable. There have been many times when the cable's been pulled in and pretty much destroyed the wood chipper. So hopefully you use a rope at the end of that cable so it can, if it does happen to go in, it'll get torn up before it pulls the cable in, the rest of the feed mechanism in. Now, there were 51 incidents and 19 fatalities in the last 5-year period that OSHA did the investigations on accidents for wood chippers themselves. You may not think that's very much, but also think about how often this tool is not used very often in a lot of places. It's not like a car where everybody's driving it every single day. One of the things they did find out that about 80% of the fatalities were people that were struck by something while working with the chipper. They were struck by the branches, or at least flying back and forth. They were struck by a cable or something that was caught up, or some piece of metal or something that was in the debris that was being chomped up. So, but the other 20% were from people being caught or run through the chipper. So I don't know about you, but 20% of the people that were in these accidents were pulled through. That's too many. That's 1 in 5. So we'll talk a little bit about some of the accidents that have occurred. Here's one where a couple of workers were trimming blackberry bushes, and one of them was a new kid on the job. He hadn't been there very long at all. And as they were finishing up, there was some debris on the chute on the hopper, and he used his foot to try and kick some of the rakings further in toward the chippers and feed rollers. Well, it was a little snowy that morning, like it is here in Saratoga. And his foot slipped on the ground and he started to go in. And that feed bar up on top, you probably know when you pull it backwards, it pulls things into the wood chipper. So as he grabbed it to try to stop himself, he was actually pulling himself in. Now, fortunately, the supervisor was right there next to him and he was able to force it back the other way. He didn't get pulled in very far and he was able to get out with just a very badly fractured ankle. But lucky to be alive. Had that supervisor not been right there at the moment when he was being pulled into that thing, he probably wouldn't have made it. So a couple of things need to be sure is in place. And about 20 years ago, OSHA required that all wood chippers be retrofitted with some type of an emergency stop mechanism. Most of them that I see when I'm out there visiting my municipalities, and I've been to almost 500 different municipalities in the state of New York in the past 10 years, most of them have upgraded or retrofitted the wood chippers with some type of an emergency stop mechanism, which is great. The newer ones have several of them built in. If your wood chipper does not have one, contact the manufacturer for a retrofit kit, or you can look online for designs on how to create one yourself. But probably the most important thing is to train workers on how to properly use the tool. Don't use their hands and feet to slide things in through the hopper, through the chute, into the chipper itself. That you can use a push stick or another branch or something like that to slide off if you want to clean it off or turn it off and pull the stuff out and put it in a bag and throw that in the back. Not everything has to go through the wood chipper. But yeah, especially when it comes to young workers or seasonal workers, don't give them any kind of tool or access to a tool that can do significant damage without training them properly on the safety methods that are needed in order for them to do the job and get home the same way they came in at the end of the day. Now, here's just an example of some of those fatalities that occurred in that last 5-year period. In Georgia, a 19-year-old employee was clearing machinery. He was dismembered when he fell into the machine. A man was killed, catapulted 50 feet when he was caught in a safety line that was still attached to a limb when he was doing some work there. Another man was run over by the chipper trailer. Speaking of being struck by, make sure everybody in the area is clear before you move things, and you know, these things do happen. Another employee loaded branch while another employee was tied to one of the safety lines, and he was pulled through with the safety line still on the machine, or on the limb. So you want to make sure that if you are using safety lines and you're starting to feed material in, it'd be a good idea to disattach or detach yourself to that safety line if you're on the ground, especially. This one happened in Schenectady just a few years back. A 23-year-old was pulled through a chipper. I remember reading about that. It's about 4 years ago now. Davie, Florida, another man was killed while clearing a chipper. North Carolina, a 19-year-old was pulled through a chipper, and the guy who was working with him died of a heart attack on the scene after seeing what had happened. Sacramento, man was decapitated when a chipper sucked up a rope that wrapped around his neck. So these things are happening out there, and they're devastating. They're awful. I can't imagine being on the scene and watching one of my friends getting killed in such a horrible way. Here's one where a man was working for a tree service and he was pulled into the chipper. He was working in a crew in front of somebody's home. Imagine maybe kids looking out the window and watching the guys work. And he was part of a 5 or 6 man crew. And what it says, he was feeding a limb into the wood chipper and he was pulled in. He was pronounced dead on the scene. When I read into this a little bit more, they said that he was wearing very loose fitting clothing and he got hung up on it. So wear tight fitting clothing, wear the right things when you're doing the job, things that are going to protect you and not put you in danger. Here's one where a guy was cleaning the interior side of a chipper when a big piece of metal came flying out, punctured him in the chest. He was about to lend the wood chipper to a couple of people. He was showing them how to operate it and clean it out. And he had it running with the door open and something failed inside the machine and it killed him. Had he had that door closed or had the machine off at that time, he may have found it loose and not turned it on. So you, like any other tool, before you use it, you want to inspect it before it's running and make sure that it's going to do the job you need it to do and it's functioning properly. A lot of times these things get put up wet and don't get used again until it's vitally needed. So you want to take time, some point, especially before you use it, to confirm that this machine is going to do the things you need it to do in a safe manner. Here's another one. It happened in Delaware where a man was killed when a steel cable caught in a wood chipper and struck them. Police and the men were doing work using the wood chipper. A steel braided cable that was used to pull the tree limbs caught in the chipper and was sheared off, and the cable sent both men flying. So that must have been part of that winch mechanism. It's horrible, some of these things that happen. Another Northern California tree trimmer deputy said he was feeding brush into the wood chipper, but the coroner says he got caught in the wood chipper, got tangled around, the rope got tangled around his neck and decapitated him. Laura said the crew said they heard him scream for just a second, but by the time they got down there to look, he was already dead. He was working with that machine alone. The other crew members were off, taking limbs down, cleaning things up. They weren't where they could see him. You should always have somebody there. Never have one person feeding the chipper, working with the chipper. Should always be at least 2. So when we talk about using any tool, there's OSHA and patch requirements that say you must train employees to understand the hazards of any tool that they're working with, but especially a tool like a wood chipper that is so horrifically dangerous. Correct operation, making sure that it works, understanding how to tighten things up, how to clear blockages, how to do the things that need to be done in order to use this machine safely. Training needs to be provided in an effective manner according to the OSHA and patch requirements. So if there are employees who don't speak English very well, then they should be given training in their native language. So understand that these things are also important. Make sure you have a safety watch. I know today with personnel, we don't have the extra personnel to have somebody as a safety watch in many cases. But understand the severity of the risks. If you're doing work on the side of the road, having a safety watch is essential. The second most common way that DPW highway guys die is in the work zone. The only thing that kills them more than being in the work zone is being behind the wheel. So you want to have a safety watch. And when you're doing work with tools like this, having a safety watch, often these are right by the roadway too. It's essential for the safety of the guys that are out there. When you're feeding things into the wood chipper, do it from the side. Don't go right straight in the front of the chute. If you're on the side, you have a chance of hanging on to something and not getting pulled through. So do it from the side. It's much better. Plus, if the limbs start to flail around as they're being fed into there, that chute limits how far they can go. If you're standing right in front of it, as it starts to flap around, that's when some people are killed. So you want to make sure that you feed from the side and not from the front. Use push sticks, things like that. Feed branches in butt first. Believe it or not, I was driving down the highway last year in the fall, and I saw a crew on the side of the road. I don't know if they were a municipal crew or some kind of a private entity, but there were guys there trying to put the leaves end in first, not the butt end. And it just, I couldn't believe my eyes, but I was just driving past, so I couldn't get a picture or stop and talk or anything. Put shorter branches on top of longer ones. You don't want things to fall through as you're trying to feed them in, and put small debris in trash cans. Not everything has to go through the wood chipper. Don't stand or climb on it while it's running. Shut it down. Remove the ignition key when it's unattended, especially if you have not enough room at your location. You may have to leave your wood chipper outdoors, and kids do run around and play, and sometimes they can get onto the grounds there, and you don't want them to start it up and play with it and end up dead. And before starting your wood chipper, make sure everything's closed up, make sure everything is tight, make sure everything is working. Check to make sure that it's not blocked from the last person putting it away, blocked up because they didn't have time or the weather was bad. You want to make sure that it's going to be working for you when you need it. Make sure the discharge chute is pointing in the right direction. Where do you want that debris to go? Don't just start using it and have it flying into traffic or onto you. Don't stand in front of the feed tube. We talked about that. Make sure that the debris that's going through is free of metal as best you can. I mean, there are times when some kids built a tree fort in it 30 years ago or whatever, and there might be some nails and things inside of things that you can't always see. But anytime you can, you want to make sure they're removed before you try to put anything through the wood chipper. Use your lockout tagout protocols. If you do have an issue inside of the machine, lock it out before you start to work on it. You don't want any stored energy to happen to be released and lose a hand, fingers, arms, or something like that. Golden rule of safety is basically if you see anybody who is doing anything unsafe, who they disable an existing safety device, you should talk to them immediately. Teach them, train them. Don't do this. If they disable a safety device, it's not just them that they're putting in danger, but the person who uses the machine with them or after them. If they're not doing something in a safe manner, teach them the safe way to do it. You don't want to be witness to one of these horrible accidents. When it comes to PPE, it's the employer's job to assess the workplace and determine what PPE is necessary when you're using any piece of equipment. The employees must also then use that equipment. So if it says if it's been determined you should be wearing a glove, a leather glove with no cuffs or something that's not going to get hooked up on it, or you're supposed to be wearing chaps or the helmet for when you're using a chainsaw, whenever the protective gear is said, hey, you should be using this while you're operating these tools, you should be using it. That's your job to make sure that you protect yourself. Your safety is your responsibility. Now, the employer is responsible to make sure you have all of the PPE and equipment and proper guarding in place, but it's up to you to make sure that you're safe. So wear those gloves with no cuffs. Wear close-fitting, tight-fitting clothing that won't get caught on anything. No suspenders, no straps, things like that. You shouldn't be wearing jewelry. If you're operating the chainsaw, you should be wearing chaps. We'll get into that a little bit more too. Now, when we come to the machine itself, there's the feed control bar. This looks like to be I don't know, could be an older piece of equipment. Usually there's a safety bar now in front and behind. There's other equipment there, but that's the feed control bar. And for some reason, it feeds things in when it gets pulled towards the back of the machine. It's the way they've always been built, and that's just the way it is. And it doesn't make much sense. You would think that you would push it forward to push things in and push it backwards to back things out, but it's exactly the opposite. And a lot of times because of that, that's where people end up getting pulled in, because they grab that feed control bar and it actually pulls them in faster. There's a bottom feed stop bar. If your wood chipper was outfitted with this initially, you want to make sure that it's there and it's functioning. If it has been disabled or removed, it can be a huge fine from PESH, and it could also puts the employees in danger when they're operating the equipment. Here's the other feed control bars. I mentioned that there may be more bars now. So you've got a panic bar that's much closer to the chute. You've also got one for the safety watch to use, as well as the feed control mechanism there. So now we've got several different devices that are meant to protect employees while they're out there using this tool. Curtain flaps are important too. If your machine was big enough and came with curtain flaps and they've been removed, you should put them back. They're there for a reason, and PESH can fine you for removing a safety device. They cut back on the amount of debris that get thrown out of the tool while it is in use. And we have the winch-driven feeds. Again, larger equipment does have these. It's usually a steel cable or some type of braided cable that is in that winch. But again, you want to extend that winch with that cable with a rope. Some type of a nylon or a cloth rope that's going to be torn apart and broken if it does happen to get pulled into the chipper and not pulled through as a steel cable might be. So in conclusion, we kind of talked about the tools themselves and some of the accidents that have occurred. Hopefully you have a little bit more respect for this tool and understand just how serious the injuries can be because of it. So remember in 2018, I didn't get 2019's numbers yet, and who knows what's going to be going on in 2020. Over 5,000 workers were killed. They went in the morning or went in to do their job on their shift and they didn't come home. That's 16 people every day got up in the morning and went to work and never made it home. Don't be the next fatality. Do the things that you need to do to keep yourself safe. All right, I'm gonna quickly try to get to this chainsaw safety. There we go. And we'll jump right into this. Now, hopefully you're not out there having to use a saw that's quite that big, but there are some places that have them and need them. Chainsaws are extremely dangerous tool as well. In the last data that was available from Consumer Product Safety Commission, about 36,000 people were injured by chainsaws. That's about how many people die in a distracted driving accidents every year. So there's significant number of people just by using a chainsaw. Not everybody uses a chainsaw like they're driving cars, and yet there are still a significantly large number of severe injuries. Average injury is 110 stitches. When you have an injury with a chainsaw, it's unforgiving. They're built to cut through some very hard material, and on the human body, it's not hard. And it will definitely have some serious ramifications if there's an accident there. 36% of these injuries were from the legs and knees, so below the waist. And we'll talk about why as we go through this. The average cost of injury was over $100,000. And if you figure $100,000 on average, 36,000 injuries, that's over $3.6 billion annually. Because of this one tool. And we're going to talk about the way most of these accidents could have been avoided. So how many of these injuries were preventable? Absolutely all of them. That saw, that piece of equipment, that tool is not going to do anything you don't tell it to do. Unfortunately, we get complacent, we develop bad habits, we get tired, and things happen. But every accident has a contributing cause. It's not always a primary factor, but it could be a distraction. It could be the wind blowing. It could be lots of different things that contribute to these accidents. But every one of them is preventable if you're using the tools safely. Now, we said almost 40% of these accidents, about 2 in 5 of these accidents were to the legs and knees. So if we just covered up chaps, right? And we looked at all the people that had incidents that were below the waist, anything that was below the waist. That was actually almost 28,000 people. At $75 each, those accidents could have been prevented by chaps. It would have cost about $2 million to outfit all those people with that one piece of PPE and would have saved over $1.3 billion. Significant amount of money, significant amount of savings. Usually when we talk about you buying safety equipment, for every dollar you spend on safety equipment, you save $6 in injury and other costs. Now here's where it broke down when they looked at the different places on the body where injuries occurred from using a chainsaw. And we see the significant number, most of them happen to the legs and below, and also to the left hand. Why the left hand? Well, you're hanging on to the saw with the right hand, and oftentimes you're using your left hand to clear out little branches, things like that, and moving it. And if you still have that saw running in your right hand, it may be close enough to that where you get it stuck. So you want to, the left hand is exceedingly one of those areas of the body that gets injured. So watch out. Think about that when you're out there using it. It's not just that you're not just focused. When you're focused on your left hand to move things around, you're not paying attention to what the right hand is doing. The left hand and the right hand have to communicate, and they can only do that through your brain. Nobody's immune. Here's Kate Blanchett was actually using a chainsaw, and she had an accident, a kickback accident, was injured significantly, as you can see in the picture on the right there. Could have been much, much worse. She wasn't wearing any PPE. When it comes to the age of the worker using the chainsaw, we can see that younger people don't have as many injuries. It's those guys in my age range and thereabouts that have the most injuries. And the thought behind that is complacency. We've been using this tool for so many years. We're familiar with it. We know how it works. We may have developed some complacently bad habits, and that's when accidents occur. We choose not to wear PPE because I've been using this for 20 years, never needed those chaps. Why do I need them today? Zap. That's the day you needed them. So you never know, but it's mostly those employees that have more than 10 years of experience that suffer the most severe and fatal injuries. So what's the best way to protect yourself from this tool? Well, like any tool, reading the owner's manual is important. Now, I know I very rarely do this, but it is something that we should all be doing. Getting that owner's manual out and understanding where the safety devices is important. Sure, chainsaws are pretty much chainsaws, and you should know where the different adjustments and safety features are. But each brand is a little bit different. They put theirs at this side, or they put this down over here because they feel it's a better way of doing it. And so if you're used to using Milwaukee and now you're using a Stihl or a Sparna or something, you want to make sure that you're familiar where the adjustment points are while you're using the tool, so you don't have to figure it out while you're on the fly. Make sure you understand proper and safe handling, especially if you've got a newer employee who may not have used a chainsaw very often. You want to make sure that they have proper training. Also, understanding bar size is important. You should have a couple of different sizes for the different jobs, but make sure that the employees are familiar with why. Unless you're using the chainsaw to carve bears out of trunks of trees or something, you should use the tool for a specific purposes. So is your saw ready? Check the owner's manual. Look for the different things that you need to do before you start that. Make sure your fluids are all at the proper levels. Your devices are working properly. Make sure the air filter is clean and that the saw is sharp and that everybody around you is wearing the proper PPE. All of these things are important before you even start this up. Once you start it up, make sure that the chain's not moving on idle. Loosen it up a little bit. If it is, you don't want to set it down to go off and do something else and then have it move forward and you turn around and you step on the saw. So you want to make sure that that chain's not moving as it goes on. Now, I put the sample maintenance schedule up here because these are things that should be happening all the time. Every time you pull that chainsaw out, you should be adjusting these things, checking these things, tightening things up. It's a lot of times, again, this is a tool that gets rode hard and put up wet, and it's not pulled back out until it's needed again in a similar situation. So in between somewhere, you should have someone assigned to checking these tools and making sure that they're in good working order for the next person. You know, after you've been out there, you've cleared trees or branches from a roadway, somebody should come in maybe the next day or so and sharpen that blade up and check and make sure that it's got all the oils and everything are right. Make sure that everything is in good working order. So when you need it again, it's going to do the job you need it to do. It's also important to understand how the saw is supposed to work. You know, understanding how it feels is an important thing. If the handle feels soft or loose or something like that, you could have a loose or broken attachment. But if you don't know what feels right, you don't know what's wrong. So you want to make sure when you start out that it's in good working order. And if things starting to loosen up and you can feel a little bit of a wobble or vibration or something, or stop and figure it out and clean and fix it. But again, if you don't know what feels right, how do you know what feels wrong? Especially with your new people, train them right the first time. Don't put them in danger. Threw this slide in here because it shows all the different pieces and parts, and you may not consider thinking about each one of these things as you're using the tool. You just pick the tool up, make sure it's got the right amount of fuel and oil in it. You pull start it, and you start to use it. And if the chain's not sharp enough, you either change it out, sharpen it up, and get going again. But you know, understanding where all these different adjustment points and different things are can help you use that tool in a safer manner. If you're carrying your saw, when it we're usually carrying these things off on uneven ground through gopher holes and anything else, and downed limbs, things like that. Be careful how you're carrying it. If you can, leave the scabbard on it. If it's in a case, bring the case all the way up to where you're working on it or very close to it. And when you do have to carry it without the scabbard or without the case, carry it like the fella in the picture here. If you do end up tripping and falling on something, you can drop it and the blade will be behind you rather than in front of you, and it might save you a few stitches. If you're going to store your saw, and a lot of times we think we're going to, and we end up using them over and over again. But if you'd like any tool, drain the fuel tank, make sure that you run it till there's no fuel in the lines, the carburetor causes it to stop. Remove the chain, store in a container of oil to prevent it from rusting. Most of my municipalities don't have the luxury of doing this. They might be able to pull one or two off, but for the most part, they're ready for use all the time. Think about fueling too. Remember, we've got approved containers. I still see some unapproved containers out at some of my municipalities, but for the most part, the older containers had been past their useful life and have been replaced. If you don't have the properly approved containers in your shop, get rid of them, get newer ones. But you want to have the fuel containers that can be grounded, that have spill controls, things like that, so that you can use them safely. Before fueling your saw, according to the owner's manual and according to Passion OSHA, you should let the saw cool before you refuel it. Well, those little gas tanks don't last very long, and you probably get barely halfway through the job before you need to fuel it up again. So basically, hopefully you'll take a few minutes, rest for a minute, get a drink of water or something, and then go back and then fuel it up before you start using it again. Give your arms a little bit of a rest, give it time to cool off a little bit, use a funnel to prevent spills, make sure that your fuel can is at least 10 feet away before you start it back up again. Now this is safety guy, right? This is the guy who's wearing all the proper PPE. Now, if you use your chainsaw and you're not using all of these things, you're putting yourself in danger. I know it seems kind of crazy, but sometimes to some people, but all of these things are there for a reason. Eye protection, glasses or goggles, some type of vented goggle is better than safety glasses, because with all the debris flying around, even though you've got the helmet with the screen or the face shield on it, you also had that debris can get up underneath the safety glasses as well. So a good safety goggle, ventilated goggle, can really go a long way in protecting your eyes. Remember, you only have two of them. And using only one can change your life completely, or losing both. The face shield is there to help you go home just as pretty as you came in that day, and keeping it down and keeping it in use is an important thing with any tool that might send debris out like that. A hard hat, there for a reason. We've got them there. The earmuffs give you that hearing protection. A long sleeve shirt, you can see that is pretty tight fitting. The cuffs are tight around his wrists so that these things won't get caught on anything. Good set of jeans below, good set of chaps, work boots, preferably steel-toed, and metatarsal guard is also potential. Remember, as you're cutting these logs, they're going to drop. And if you got one foot in front of the other and bracing yourself to use the tool, that may drop onto your foot. So think about which direction that limb or tree is going to drop when you're cutting through it. When you're starting your saw, you can see that it's got the little foot hold there to help hold it on the ground when you're pull starting it. You put it on a stump or the back of the pickup truck, but don't just drop start your saw. Sometimes these will kick back. They're not smooth. They get a little bit of problem with the ignition process, and it may start up and all of a sudden you've got this running saw and you don't have control of it because all you got is a handle on the top bar. So I want to let you know that this video is a little bit graphic. So if you don't, if you're not good at that, you might see a picture like it's coming up over there. So let's see if we can get this video working. And apparently it's not going to come up the way it should. It was the guy this hand was injured, and there was a video of him talking about it while he was at the emergency room. So apparently that video has been removed from YouTube, or it's not available right now. So I'll have to go find another good video for that. But he was starting the saw, and as that happened, you can see that he got that caught into the chain, and it pretty much ate away half of his hand there. Now, while you're operating the saw, you want to make sure that you're operating it safely. You want to make sure that you've got both hands on the saw at all times while you're cutting things. You don't want to try and cut through limbs and branches, trees while holding only on to that back handle. Sometimes this is where that left hand gets injured, is when that right hand is operating the saw by itself and the left hand is being used to hold on to something else, and things shift and move and or the saw kicks back, and that's when the other hand gets injured. Speaking of kickbacks, most new saws come with a kickback guard on the very end. Do not remove that guard. Pesh will or can fine you significantly for having that guard removed if it was there on the saw when you bought it. But kickbacks occur when the tip of that saw is running and they hit something, and that high speed chain kicks that saw right back straight up at the person, kind of like in the picture here. There's a quick little video here. Now it is kind of graphic, so I want to show you that. But this fellow was out here doing some work outside an office building. Just happened to be in the area where the surveillance camera was. So we'll take a quick look here at this video. The sound you hear in the background is just the office, folks. Now, never operate that saw with it between your legs like that. And see how quick that happened? That fast. I'll run through that again. He's just sawing through this, and everything seems to be going well, and he's not having any issues, and he's not paying attention to the end of that blade, and bam. It only takes that split second to change your life forever. No PPE. You can see the picture there on the left, what happened to his face. So very quick, changed his life forever. So avoid the kickback. If it's got a chain brake or kickback guard, make sure it's there. Use the saw firmly with both hands. Look for things on the other end of what you're cutting. Don't get your chainsaw caught in that, and don't pinch the chainsaw while you're cutting a log. Understand where the pressure is going to go as well when you release it from while you're cutting the branches or limbs. Keep the chain sharp so it does the job you want it to do the way you want it to do it. You're not trying to force it into doing something that shouldn't, or you don't want it to get hot and have the chain break. If you're bucking and limbing, you want to avoid making cuts with the saw between your legs, like the fellow in the video we just watched, because if there is going to be kickback, you're leaned right over it and it's coming right back at you. Wear your PPE. Had that guy had the helmet on with the face mask, he probably would have just had to go pick it up and put it back on to keep working that day instead of having major cosmetic surgery. Stand to one side of the limb when you're cutting it. That way, if you do get kickback, it's going to come back up over your shoulder and not right into your face. Think about where that chain might go if it were to break. Understand that's why you want to be wearing your gloves and some kind of long sleeve shirt too, because if it were to wrap around or up, or you want to make sure that it's not going to dig into you or your skin. Keep the chain out of the dirt and rocks. That keeps it clean, keeps it sharp. And don't put yourself in an off balance position. If you've got to reach out with the chainsaw and it puts you off balance, move your position, change the ladder position, do something, but don't put yourself in an awkward position. Make sure that once the tree is down, that it's stable. And when you start releasing the pressure off of the limbs that are holding it up, understand where it's likely going to go and what's going to happen, and work from the uphill side whenever possible. I actually had one municipality I went to 2 years in a row because an accident occurred when the same crew was cutting limbs off from the downhill side, and the log rolled onto one of them. So remove it from the uphill side. Let gravity work for you, not against you. Understand the pressure that's on these limbs and where they may go, where they may spring back to, and what might happen once the pressure is released. Use a wedge. Understand the proper methods of doing this job. And stand beside the saw, not directly behind it. Here's the talk about widowmakers. Now, a lot of guys, you're going through the parks, and as you're going down the trails and checking things out, cleaning things up, you should be looking up too and looking for any branches that may have broken off during a storm or halfway come down, so that they don't fall onto hikers and walkers and bikers and kids on those trails. But also, before you start doing any kind of work, you got to look up and make sure that if there are any up there, you get them down. You can tie a brick to a rope or something, throw them up there, pull them down, or tie to the back of the truck and drive away and pull them down. Do something, but get them out. Hopefully you don't have to climb up the tree to get them down. But you got to get those out of the way before you work under it, or before you allow anybody else under it. You want to be looking for these things because they're called widowmakers for a reason. Because of the breeze or vibrations or whatever, one day they come loose and they can fall and hit or kill somebody. Stump jumping can occur when you're taking a tree down. Usually it's because as the tree is starting to fall, it hits another tree and that causes the pressure to kick back down below. So we'll talk about the safe areas to be when the tree starts to fall. But being directly behind it in its felling direction can be very dangerous. There's also a condition called a barber chair, especially a tree that's still alive and working. It breaks off as it's falling down. Some of the older dead trees can do this as well. So depending on the condition of the tree, they may partially break off and come down. This can also happen in higher wind situations as well. So here's the safe zone I was telling you about. Obviously, the areas in yellow you don't want to be in, the direction that the tree may be falling. It could be hit something and twist and all that. So anywhere in that direction and that 180 degrees, you want to be out of it. You don't want to be directly behind it because of the barber chair, because of that kickback, the potential there, it could jump right back off the stump. You want to be working from one side or the other. And as soon as the tree starts to go, you want to hightail it out of there. So you should have a clear evacuation path away from the tree that's being taken down. Don't put yourself in a dangerous situation. And hopefully you'll be a little bit better at predicting where the tree's going to fall than where this guy is, because he's going to have to find some alternate transportation in order to get home. Even the best don't always have things go the way that they want them to go. This was probably a very, very obviously a very expensive mistake. If you don't feel comfortable felling or cutting a tree, don't do it. It's okay to ask for help or to get a service to come out and do it is even a better situation. It reduces the liability on the municipality and it protects the employees who may only do this a couple times a year. It's better to have someone come out who's doing it all the time. So like any other tool, chainsaws, when they're properly used, they're great. They do an awesome job and they help us do the things we need to do to keep things clear. They should be properly maintained. You should know the risks, know the procedures and safe handling, know how it works. Is knowing how to work and using it in the way it's meant to be used is the best thing you can do. Now, before I let you, David, come back on and let you go, I just want to say thank you for everything you guys do out there. Keeping those roads clear and keep maintaining our municipalities. You know, I couldn't do my job and get out there to all these places and help them try to reduce these risks and avoid these accidents if it wasn't for you guys doing your job and helping me to get there. So I want to say thanks for that. David, do you want to make some closing remarks?
Yeah, well said, Jay. You guys have a job that, in the various aspects that you do, from driving to doing this kind of tree work that Jay is talking about. It's a dangerous job that highway departments and DPWs have. And so that's why we like to put on these presentations. I want to make everybody aware that if there were some folks on your staff that couldn't see today's presentation, we have recorded it. It's going to be uploaded to the NYMER Online University. If you're not signed up for the online university, contact either Jay or myself, and we'll help you get there so that you can, and the other webinars that we've shown, the snow and ice safety, the preventive maintenance on large trucks, those have also been uploaded to the NYMER Online University. So they're available at your convenience. That online university sign up is going to make your lives easier and make access to these convenient for you. So with that, thanks everybody for joining us. We look forward to having future webinars that are of use to you, and be safe out there and have a great and safe plow season. Take care, folks.
Thanks, everyone.